Hello, this is Flynn, and you're listening to the Liminal Universe Podcast. Last episode, we had some guests on to talk about tunnels and our trips to several of them, and it's been a while since then, hasn't it? I've had some gaps in episodes being released, but pretty sure this is the biggest by far. So I wanted to start off by saying I apologize for that, and to assure you all that I am not going anywhere, and that there are a lot of really cool episodes coming up soon. There's a lot that I want to cover this year, and planned a lot of fun stuff out. On this episode, though, we're going to be talking about a trip I took in 2023, I know it's been a while, to Eastern State Penitentiary. And I'll be sharing some of the videos and pictures that I took. I'd originally intended to produce this episode much sooner, but due to just a huge backlog of other work, took roughly a year to get everything ready. But I'm very excited to have this episode completed, since it's one of the coolest places I visited so far for this podcast. And I hope that you enjoy this episode, and that you learn some cool things about this famous historical site. You know, even maybe leaving you wanting to check it out for yourself. So, we're going to do a brief overview of Eastern State. The location is 2027 Fairmount Avenue in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It is about 195 years old, and currently it's been closed as a prison since 1970, and is now a National Historic Landmark and museum that's open for tours pretty much every day. So, this episode is going to be broken up into a few different parts about Eastern State. It kind of took me a while after doing research to see how I wanted to cover certain topics, and when, how I wanted them to flow from one to another. So, I just gave you kind of a brief overview of, where it is. And next we're going to talk about its history from its inception until it closed. And then we're going to talk about what's happened at Eastern State since it closed. That will include a lot of other subtopics, like how it became a museum, some of the programs and installations that are hosted there, the current goals of the stewards of Eastern State, some trivia about it, like notable inmates and escapes, media that was produced there, alleged hauntings, and finally, what my experience was like there. Yeah, so we got a lot to cover this time. This will probably be one of the longer episodes, even though it's just me here. So, let's get into the history. In 1821, after many years of lobbying from the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons, the Pennsylvania legislature approved funding to build Eastern State Penitentiary. In 1822, construction began on the foundations and the walls. Then, in 1829, on October 25th, Eastern State Penitentiary opened in what is now Philadelphia's Fairmount neighborhood, and received its first prisoner. I'll give their description. Charles Williams, prisoner number 1. Burglar. Light black skin, 5 feet 7 inches tall. Foot 11 inches, scar on nose, scar on thigh, broad mouth, black eyes, farmer by trade, can read, theft included, one $20 watch, one $3 gold seal, one a gold key. Sentenced to 2 years confinement with labor, received by Samuel R. Wood, first warden, Eastern State Penitentiary. Eastern State was the first prison to really create and instill the Pennsylvania model of imprisonment. So this is where prisoners were subjected to 24 hours of solitary confinement. This then revolutionary method was designed to mentally break prisoners and inspire true regret in their hearts. So instead of directly punishing them, beating the shit out of them and torturing them, which was supposed to be believed to be the most effective methods to preserve isolation at all times. Instead, the prison policy required inmates to wear hoods whenever people would move them around the penitentiary, and to help kind of offset the costs of incarceration, the state required prisoners to do work in their cells, including shoemaking, weaving, and chair caning. They ate 3 meals a day in their cells and exercised 1 to 2 times every day in small exterior exercise yards. And then on Sundays, they had local ministers give sermons in the quarters. So, early intake records reveal that there was a diverse prisoner population, men, women, people of basically every background. However, African Americans were always disproportionately represented during the entire prison's history. And the experiment of having strict isolation, the Pennsylvania model, other than just daily visits from the warden and the guards, became really popular, and it became a model for prison design worldwide. Although this did not last very long, people did try to emulate what they were doing in Eastern State. In the 19th century, when Eastern State was first opened, the vast majority of prisoners had committed property crimes, including theft, predominantly horse theft, burglary, and robbery. Most served 2-year sentences, but a lot of them also did serve longer terms if they were more like serious crimes such as murder. In this time period, and really all of them, many prisoners refused to work, sabotaging their tools and equipment, or using their tools to fashion knives to attack overseers. Prisoners, especially Irish Catholics, frequently refused visits from the Protestant moral instructor or pretended to accept religion to get shorter sentences. So, they'll say, oh, this model of isolation has made me closer to God and repentance. Let me out. Others, though, found ways to kind of keep subverting the system there by sending notes through plumbing lines or kind of tapping like Morse code, just tapping on the walls. This also happens at correctional institutions worldwide. It always has happened. People kind of getting around the system. So that's not unique just to Eastern State. The Pennsylvania system used at Eastern State did, like I said, have several issues, such as it being difficult for prisoners to work due to the isolation. They couldn't exactly, work with each other. And it led to the prison being kind of harder to sustain itself compared to other systems like the Auburn system that had factory work as the main source of labor. And while intentions started out good with the Pennsylvania system, it often led to a lot of mental illness due to the severe isolation. And kind of keeping in line with issues like how black inmates were way overrepresented and being incarcerated there, a lot of these mental issues caused by this isolation were attributed to them more than other people there, largely in part due to a lot of racist beliefs about that demographic. In 1831, work was completed on Cell Block 3, which was the last of the original single-story cell blocks. Work also began on Cell Block 4, 5, 6, and 7. And these were all 2 stories to accommodate the increasing number of people incarcerated at Eastern State. Cell Block 7 was completed in 1835, and also in 1831, Eastern State received its first female prisoner. In 1832, Eastern State saw its first escape. William Hamilton, inmate number 94, who served as the warden's waiter, lowers himself from the roof of the front building, and once captured, he will also again escape in the same manner in 1837. In 1836, the original prison is completed, covering an area of 11 acres with state-of-the-art plumbing, sewage systems, and 450 centrally heated cells. Eastern State Penitentiary has cost nearly $780,000 and is one of the most expensive buildings of its day in the United States. In 1842, Charles Dickens visits the United States to see Niagara Falls and Eastern State Penitentiary. He will later write, "The system is rigid, strict, and hopeless solitary confinement, and I believe it in its effects to be cruel and wrong." Also, in around the 1840s, changing immigration patterns brought more Irish and German inmates to Eastern State Penitentiary. In the 1850s, problems with prisoner management, overcrowding, and mental health led Eastern States officials to slowly relax the rules of isolation. Overcrowding prompted construction of even more cells, and beginning in the 1860s, officials frequently housed more than one prisoner per cell. In 1877, 4 new cell blocks were added. There were more changing immigration patterns as well, and that brought in more Italian and Eastern European descendants and prisoners between the 1880s through the 1920s. In 1911, they completed cell block 12, which was put between cell block 6 and 7. And then in 1923, the women prisoners were moved to a new prison. So after that year, it was just men that were housed there. In 1924, on August 12th, then Pennsylvania Governor Gifford Pinchot sentenced Pep, the cat-murdering dog, to life at Eastern State. Pep allegedly murdered the governor's wife's cherished cat, and prison records reflect that Pep was assigned prisoner number, which was C2559. In 1926, construction began on cell block 14, Eastern State's second 3-story cell block. Any space between the cell blocks by that point was nearly gone, and the penitentiary, intended to hold 250 people, now held around 1,700. In 1933 and 1934, there were 2 riots which involved inmates setting fires due to various complaints such as overcrowding and other bad conditions. In 1958, the city of Philadelphia certified Eastern State Penitentiary as a historic property. Again, prison was still in use at the time, though. In 1961, all the cell blocks were desegregated, so only took, 140 years and 9 years before it closed for them to get around to doing that. In 1965, the federal government designates Eastern State Penitentiary as a National Historic Landmark. In January of 1970, Eastern State Penitentiary closed, with the remaining inmates being transferred to another state prison. And then also later that year and through part of 1971, the city of Philadelphia used Eastern State to house prisoners from the county prison at Holmesburg following a riot there. And this was interesting to me since the prison had officially closed by then, so these were technically the last inmates to reside at Eastern State. In the decade and a half since the closure, the grounds became dilapidated and deserted. An urban jungle grew within the cell blocks, and the prisoners were replaced by stray cats and crumbling walls. So, seeing almost no value in the historic prison, the city was ready to sell Eastern State's 11-acre plot to the highest bidder. The prison was instead turned into a museum due to the efforts of a group known as the Eastern State Task Force. And it was composed of members from Temple University, historians, the National Park Service, and more. But some of the criticism that I had found online of this task force is that there were very different demographically from all the nearby residents in the neighborhoods surrounding the prison, and that they also had little ties to any of the prisoners as well. And then also that they were really focused just on preservation and making it so that the prison wasn't demolished or turned into something else. And instead of outreach, which are the main goals today, and I don't hold some of that against them. They were getting ready to sell and possibly get rid of the prison itself. So, preservation really was the main priority for them. But, people have, had different opinions on them online about their effectiveness, about what their true goals were. But they did succeed in preventing the prison from getting demolished or renovated or whatever. And we would not have Eastern State if it wasn't for a lot of those early efforts, to their credit. In 1971, the city acquired the title to the prison for $400,000. So actually quite a bit less, not counting for inflation, than what it cost to build the thing. Pretty good deal. In the 1980s, the Fairmount area saw expanding economic growth, and the city transferred Eastern State to the Redevelopment Authority to find commercial use. So people kept trying to develop the property because it's huge and right in the middle of the city. Like, it would be a prime spot. Several redevelopment plans were brought to the city, such as a theme park, luxury apartments, and a shopping center. And then the mayor at the time, Wilson Good, though, rejected all of them. And then, kind of some years passed. In 1991, the task force kind of came up with the idea to give tours to the prison around Halloween to help raise extra funding. The event ended up being a huge hit, and it became an annual tradition known as Terror Behind the Walls, and then later as Halloween Nights. The site received its first funding as well from the Pew Charitable Trust to perform necessary stabilization and preservation. In 1994, Eastern State opened for daily historic tours with nearly 10,000 visitors that year. In 1996, permanent museum exhibits are constructed and a marketing campaign begins. The World Monument Fund includes Eastern State Penitentiary on its list of the 100 most important endangered landmarks in the world. In 2003, the 10th season of public tours was marked with the introduction of the Voices of Eastern State audio tour, narrated by actor Steve Buscemi, who is still having that be a part of the tour today, and I listened to it myself when I was walking around during my visit. In 2005, Cell Block 7 opened to the public for the first time. In 2016, the installation Prisons Today: Questions in the Age of Mass Incarceration opens. It will eventually win the highest award in the museum field, the Excellence in Exhibitions Award overall winner from the American Alliance of Museums. And then in 2017, Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site adopts a new mission statement, with it being a focus on interpreting the legacy of the criminal justice reform. Currently, some of the installations and exhibits include Al Capone's restored 19th century cell, stories of inmate escapes, Pyrrhic Defeat, a visual study of mass incarceration, and Other Absences, among many more installations. Each year, Eastern State hosts Halloween Nights, which was again formerly known as Terror Behind the Walls. This is an annual haunted house that happens inside of the cell blocks, usually cell block 12, if I remember it right. And designed with a high startle factor, this attraction includes more than 200 performers. And several of the different kind of themed attractions of that haunted house include a 3D haunted house, one's called Night Watch, Infirmary, The Experiment, and Lockdown, The Uprising, among many more. I won't never go to that, though, because I've said, I think on so many of these episodes, that I'm just not into that kind of shit. Another popular program that happens at Eastern State, and the one that I went to, is called Summer Nights. And these events advertise themselves as ways for visitors to explore the profound impact of recreation on prison life through engaging talks, family-friendly activities, and interactive experiences. At Summer Nights, you'll learn more about Eastern State's history and the criminal justice system in America. You'll also discover the rich and captivating history of sports, the arts, and other team activities at Eastern State and in prisons today. Notably, these are not meant to be scary and don't have any of the thrills or scares that you would find at the haunted house that comes later in the year. These summer night events usually just run for a couple months, with the 2024 season being from June 7th to July 27th. So if it's something that you want to do, you don't have like a big time frame to go. Other things to do at the summer night events include visiting the Fairchance Beer Garden, which I skipped because I don't really like beer, the Sports and Recreation Scavenger Hunt, Home Run Hits, where you get the chance to learn about baseball in prisons before getting to step up to the plate yourself, and the Unlocking History, Making Headlines, and Unlocking History Music Behind the Walls tours. And so, like I said, this was the first time that I went to Eastern State, and I would really recommend it for first timers going there. It was a great chance to kind of learn about the prison, explore on your own, and also relax there. Now, I've covered topics of social justice on this podcast several times, most notably with my first Roads to Nowhere episode on Baltimore's Highway to Nowhere. However, while I'll bring these topics up when they're relevant to an episode, I haven't spent too much time on this podcast discussing social issues. I'm definitely not averse to doing so. So it's just not something that's been a main focus in most of my episodes. But since a very large part of the work done at Eastern State since its closure is focused on these topics, particularly prison reform, and outreach, it'd be really wrong of me to not highlight the work that's being done here. So, on the main Eastern State website, their mission is as follows per their board of directors. Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site preserves America's first penitentiary, advancing public understanding of the criminal justice system and its impact on the lives of those affected by it, to inspire a more just future. Their vision is of a criminal justice system that treats everyone with fairness and dignity. In their Prisons Today exhibit, they have an interactive way to shed light on issues of incarceration. It elicits personal connections to recent historic changes in the U.S. criminal justice system, encourages reflection, supports dialogue, and suggests steps that visitors can take to help shape the evolution of the American criminal justice system moving forward. It also acts as a companion to The Big Graph, an installation at Eastern State, as well as Justice 101, which we'll get into soon. The Prisons Today part of Eastern State's website also has a 3D interactive tour of the exhibit, which lets you see inside the prison itself. Justice 101, like I just mentioned, is a monthly discussion series examining the history of the justice system in America from its founding to today, and the impact that has on society, citizens, and the world. People can attend these events in person, on Zoom, or watch them later online. And speaking of that, one thing that I've wanted to do for a long time with this podcast was add audio sources like samples and clips into my episodes. Whether it's music and sounds maybe in the background like I'm talking, like now. Having different intro and outro themes. The new one, which you're hearing on this episode, by the way, as well as, clips from other sources. So, with that being said, I'm going to do my first attempt at this by playing a bit of audio from one of the recent Justice 101 episodes on YouTube. This episode is Justice 101, The State of the Union on Criminal Justice Reform, where the host for that episode gives an overview of the Justice 101 program. So here we go.
Welcome, everybody. It is wonderful to have you here on the program today. Today's program is going to look closely at the criminal justice system and really trying to understand the state of the union on the topic around the criminal justice system and criminal justice reform. We believe this is an unbelievably important topic right now as we're moving into probably one of the most significant elections in modern history. So it's a topic that we hear across the news. It's a topic that we hear in our communities. It's a topic that we hear a lot of our political leaders speaking about. But we want to dig into the data and dig into the understanding of where is the criminal justice system right now in America, and what are the facts and the data that we can pull into this conversation. Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site, which is where I'm actually located today, is in Philadelphia. We are a historic site and a nonprofit. We are a nonpartisan. So we're going to come at this conversation with learning and understanding. And we are so excited for the panel that we have before us. So this series that we have launched last year is called Justice 101. It's a series that helps us examine the history of the justice system in America from its founding to today and the impact that it has on all of us, on our society, on our citizens, on the people we live with, and in fact, in some ways, how it echoes across the world. So this is a really interesting work for us to dive into, and we have lined up some amazing speakers.
I also have another brief piece of audio from that same presentation that I would like to play as well. So here we go with the second part.
If a part of that conversation on recidivism, the conversation on criminal justice work and what really makes a difference is about opening up those conversations and is about, get out the vote, but not get out the vote just to vote, get out the voter education around these issues. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done before we can just say, oh, we're going to talk about this and move on. But we have to realize in this conversation, and I know we all do, is that it's not just about informing people. It's in being able for people to come into that storyline and engage with something that can, for certain people, cause shame, and for other people, give shame. So how do we really unpack that?
So I think that these clips emphasize really well what the goal of these talks are, as well as what the people working at Eastern State and the surrounding community hope to achieve. All of these Justice 101 lectures are on YouTube as well, on Eastern State's page, and I have linked that below. So if you'd like to hear more from this or other Justice 101 presentations, please check that out. I'm sure they would really appreciate that. So would I. In their 2023 annual report, this site, which was the birthplace of criminal justice reform in young America, still calls to all of its citizens today, asking us again, have we established a fair and just society? Our work is oriented in building a stronger community understanding and respect for fundamental human dignity and to effect positive change within the country's justice system. In order to fully realize this work, Eastern State Penitentiary strives for local and national reach. And in addition to that, I'm going to quote another long passage from the report, but one that I think is really important for all of us to understand, especially now that we know the history of the prison, as well as having already talked about some of the prison reform dialogue that Eastern State now focuses heavily on. So, here we go. Eastern State Penitentiary embodied a criminal justice reform movement posing one of the greatest questions regarding incarceration. What are the purposes of punishment in prison? We must examine the founding of our criminal justice system in America while contending with the issue of how one system could have competing aims, including reform, deterrence, punishment, retribution, justice, and profit. There is no place in America better to teach this than Philadelphia Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site, ESPHS. Understanding how our founding principles defined a vision characterized by a quest for individual liberty can frame today's dialogue. Have we built a fair and just society? Have we established justice? People have certain inalienable rights, but how do we respect those rights and establish a just system based on rule of law? ESP was the genesis of addressing these questions that we will struggle with today. And I thought that this is one of the most important passages that I've read in this episode, and I really do hope that all of you who are listening to it go over it a few times. There are a lot of thoughtful things being expressed here, one of which is the idea that because Eastern State had such an influence on prisons around the world, they also have the responsibility to be introspective of that and think about how we as a society can be better towards those that have been deemed unacceptable and or criminal. And just because at one time certain things were thought of as favorable, like the Pennsylvania model of incarceration, that doesn't mean that society can't grow and learn from mistakes that weren't even thought of as mistakes at the time. They're asking questions that aim for visitors to embrace critical thinking about social issues, particularly incarceration. On a more lighthearted note, here's some interesting trivia that I've come across about Eastern State Penitentiary. I mentioned notable inmates a little bit earlier, so some former inmates include bank robber Slick Willie Sutton and Al Capone, who had served 8 months there. I've personally been in Al Capone's cell, and I have to say, if you had to do any time at that prison, besides being a guard who can leave, that's where you'd want to be. That guy had to have had some crazy pull to have had it as nice as it was for that time and place. Because I've seen what all the other standard cells were, it was pretty bad. So, more than 100 people have escaped from Eastern State, and it's over 140 years of active use. It's speculated, though, that at least 5 people had managed to escape and, remain at large. And so these people were Leo Callahan in 1923. Along with 5 other prisoners, they built a ladder to escape. He was the only one to stay out, and for a while, the only one that people had thought had ever fully gotten away. Bernard Teese in 1838, he got his cell open and climbed the wall. Apparently, his family also never saw him again. Patrick Lafferty in 1866, dude just walked out the fucking gate. The warden wrote that Patrick had, quote, dressed himself in a suit of clothes belonging to a prisoner, going out on expiration of sentence, and was permitted by said Officer Gaines to pass out. That actually kind of reminds me of in the movie Idiocracy, where the main character goes to prison, and he doesn't want to be there because it's horrible, and he just goes to the guard and says, like, yeah, actually, I'm supposed to be going out of prison today, not in it, and they just let him out. So, I thought that was hilarious that I guess back in the day you could just do that. There was James Stewart in 1892, did not have much information on, and Timothy Boyle in 1877, with the help of 2 other bakery workers. Boyle concealed himself in an empty cask that was on a wagon leaving the prison. And apparently when the wagon got to its destination, the cask was empty, so dude got away. So some movies, shows, and other media that was filmed at Eastern State. In 1985, Tina Turner shot her One of the Living music video there. In 1996, the movie 12 Monkeys with Bruce Willis was filmed there. In 1998, Return to Paradise was filmed there. In 2000, the film Animal Factory, directed by Steve Buscemi, who does the audio tour at Eastern State, was filmed there. And in 2008, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen was filmed there as well. And then apparently also a punk rock band from Philly called The Dead Milkmen shot part of a video for their song Punk Rock Girl there as well. And now for the part of the episode that I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for. I've chosen to discuss this topic separate from the haunted house, since while that's a temporary attraction, part of why there is one, besides making money, is due to the rumors of paranormal activity at Eastern State. That's right, we're talking about hauntings. In fact, several paranormal shows have visited the site, among them being Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, BuzzFeed Unsolved, and MTV's Fear. It's actually where I first learned about Eastern State, by the way, which you're about to be hearing a clip from in just a moment. Instead of putting this earlier in the episode, I thought it would be more appropriate to play after talking about some shows and movies that were filmed there, as well as when we're discussing supernatural rumors and trivia about the place. So, that being said, here's a brief clip from MTV Fear introducing the contestants on an episode, for lack of a better word, to Eastern State Penitentiary. And now that you've heard about the history of the place, as you're listening to this clip, think about, what they're saying.
Welcome to Eastern State Penitentiary. Built in 1829, this prison's rehabilitation techniques of solitary confinement and isolation soon became a nightmare of madness and suicide.
Each prisoner was isolated in his cell, and the intent was that he would never speak to another human being.
It's like walking into a coma. That's what this is. It's like a black hole, like a coffin.
There is such a sense of evil in this building. The violence, the anger, the hostility, it's still here in these walls.
We had every kind of inmate in here, from stealing a horse to incest, murder, rape, you name it, we had it, and we kept them under control.
A guy hit a guard, and they beat him with baseball bats. And they took him down to the hospital, but he took him down in a wheelbarrow.
The prison authorities came up with a variety of terrible punishments. There was an iron gag, there was water torture, there was straitjackets.
Inmates became depressed. They sometimes hanged themselves, they set themselves on fire. It was a place of constant mental anguish.
No radio, no recreation, no nothing. Just plain doing hard time.
So, I actually thought that while a lot of television shows, especially in this genre, will embellish a lot of stuff, even just fucking make everything up, they didn't do a bad job here of giving an introduction to Eastern State. Obviously the music, the choice of topics, etc., they're all carefully chosen. But after doing a lot of research on the location, it wasn't blatantly false stuff. It was just true. Which I do believe this show has done other locations, like, just fucking lying about everything, or embellishing a lot of stuff, or, making things seem just, way out of proportion. So kudos to the producers for being, quite frankly, really truthful here. As much as just any 2000s reality TV show on MTV could be, I have to give them credit. They had inmates, people that had worked there, and I looked up their names too, because in the video that this came from, they'll show who's speaking at what given time in the introduction video, and it seems like all those people were actually there, So, man, gotta give them credit. Nothing about that seemed like bullshit at all. Aside from, of course, they'll, embellish stuff, but whatever. That's just gonna happen. So, that's something that I hope you all kind of find interesting too, having heard the history of the place from me, where I got it from the Eastern State website and other articles and historical sites, compared to a TV show who really, again, they were truthful. I know I've harped on this like 4 times, but I really am impressed by that, actually. So hats off to them. Another place that you can also see media from Eastern State is Reddit as well, such as the Liminal Space subreddit, where people have made 5-6 posts about Eastern State. I've not posted any pictures on there myself, at least for Eastern State, but I thought that it was interesting because it shows that I'm not the only person that felt like this site can fit into that aesthetic and it kind of belongs there too. And now that I've covered most of the prison's history, it's time to talk about my trip there in August of 2023. I went to one of, if not I think the last of the summer night events there that year, and I chose to arrive at one of the latest available entry times so that it'd be as dark as possible when I walked around, just to get what I felt would be a better experience than if I went at like fucking 5 p.m., when it was still the sunny as it would be at noon. I spent the first hour or so doing the audio tour in the recommended order, although I did go on my own path eventually. Mostly once I went through the first cell block or two on the tour, and then I was back in the rotunda there. I'd recommend starting with the audio tour until going through at least the first couple cell blocks that it will lead you through for doing your own thing. Because there are like 30 stops on the tour. I will admit I did not do all of them, at least not all of them in order. But it was really useful for getting a feel of the space and for hearing about the history of the prison. So, one thing I was surprised by was how many other people were around at the time that I went, and how for like a lot of my time there, it felt really difficult to be alone. I really tried. Not just for the pictures and videos that I took, because I think it'd be so much cooler if I took the shot of a cell block and no one was there, whatever. But just from my own experience to be as isolated as I could be there. Because again, the whole prison was built initially on trying to isolate people, and I wanted to do my best to experience that as much as I could. It wasn't until like maybe the last hour or so, especially when it finally got actually dark, and I went to places such as Death Row, that I could regularly go like 5 minutes without seeing or hearing somebody else. So for most of the night, if you look at the videos I took, the pictures I took, there's people all around, if not in the same cell block as me, pretty close by. You can see in one of the pictures that I have of the beer garden, there's, when I'm just walking around in a cell block and it looks so spooky, 300 feet away, people are enjoying the beer. So it's impossible at that point, especially because, they let people in, to be completely and utterly alone there, but I did do my best. And I felt that I did get a kind of special experience being there at night, alone in some areas. I had to work for it, but it was worth it. I mentioned it a few times on this podcast, though, that I don't really believe in any paranormal stuff. Which, I get, is kind of ironic because I talked about the hauntings of this show, the hauntings of the show, the hauntings of Eastern State. I watched shows about that. I've been to other places. I had an entire episode of this podcast about haunted places, and I will be going to other ones in the future this year, but, I'll put that out there again. I'm not necessarily a believer in it, though I'm not going to necessarily go out of my way to just bring that upon myself on the off chance that stuff is real, as well as out of respect for the places that I go to and the people that have resided at those places. I don't want this episode, and a lot of them, to just be a spectacle. I think that that's something that people have done with places like Eastern State, where they focus so heavily on hauntings or rumors and myths. And when they do that, they kind of, not like turn it into a theme park, but just don't have as much respect for the real history that went down there, for the people that spent time there, that suffered there, and for the goals of Eastern State today, where they're trying to get people to be more informed and to just kind of open their eye a little bit more about justice and leave with some impression. Whatever that one would be, they want it to be a changing experience. So, yeah, with that being said, like I said, I spent a decent amount of time there alone at night. I did not feel, see, or notice, hear, whatever, anything. I do think that knowing that there were other people around the general area, like I mentioned, it definitely helps with remembering that even if a spot there was kind of creepy, like when I was alone in Death Row or a cell block by the tuberculosis ward, if you look up those pictures that I have linked below, they definitely were creepier, for sure, especially at night. And it does kind of help knowing that just a couple 100 feet away, someone's just sitting on a lawn chair and hanging out. So, sadly for y'all, I do not have any ghost stories or experience of my own to share, but I did enjoy the trip quite a bit. And I do plan to go back this summer for their summer nights. It'll been 2 years since then. And I'll again try to go at nighttime around dark and do a revisit of the place. Because it was fun, it was educational, and now that I've done a podcast on this place, I think it'd be really appropriate to go back, knowing what I know now, having done all this research, and seeing what the experience is like with that. And who knows, I might even be able to get some of my former guests to go with me, so we'll see. But we'll probably do another revisit episode on Eastern State coming again later this year. It will definitely not take almost 2 years to get that episode out like this one did. Alright. Well, we're basically almost done here, but I've got one last item to take care of. Your homework. And this week, your homework is to go to prison, get a felony under your belt, and go behind bars. Or, if you'd like another assignment, I'd like you to reach out to me and discuss what you think about the prison system in the USA, or even any country that you reside in. I know from my Spotify Wrapped that I do have an international audience, going even as far as New Zealand, so shout out to all of you who live there. I did notice, and I appreciate it. And I would love to hear your thoughts on incarceration wherever you may live, or just anywhere else. And I think that one great thing that Eastern State does is just opening a dialogue into these issues. And you're more than welcome to share your thoughts on them with me. Next episode, I'm going to be covering more aesthetics. And we're going to be talking about things like canopsia, the night feeling, and more that are related to liminal spaces. So look forward to that episode coming very soon. Thank you all for listening. Goodbye.